Okay, so I'd like to welcome everyone this morning for our Thursday morning timely topic. We're very fortunate to be joined this morning by Miss Celeste Scott, who is my counterpart out in West Tennessee. She is the UT Extension agent out there and really specializes in horticulture. And she's a member of our UT Extension work group that deals with landscapes, sustainable landscapes, and also our Master Gardener program. And if you look, you may see her name on a lot of publications where we do recommended plantings. And so we're very fortunate to have her with us here this morning. And so our topic for today is going to be container plantings. And it's one that is very common, and we see this. It's kind of a feature almost of every porch and patio in America, and we thought that there was no better, more significant, timely topic that we could have this morning than container plantings. And so, Celeste, I don't want to take up any more of your time, and we're very appreciative to have you here this morning, and I'll turn it over to you so you can go ahead and share your screen, and we can get the program started this morning.
Okay, that sounds good. Let me get things started. Y'all are going to see my desktop here just for a minute. One of my desktops. You know how that is. Got to have the multiple screens going on here. I'm going to get some things minimized and we'll pull up our presentation. Start it from the beginning. That's always the best place to start, isn't it? Okay, so hopefully you guys are seeing a screen that says mixed containers, art or accident. Are we looking good?
Yes, looks great.
Okay. Let me minimize these. I don't need to look at myself the whole time I talk to y'all. All right. Well, like Greg said, I'm Celeste Scott, and I'm the horticulture extension agent over here in the Western region in Madison County. And I just love plants. I mean, I can't tell y'all how infatuated I am with them. And believe it or not, while I have been involved in many of these lists where we're creating to recommend specific cultivars and plants that perform well in West Tennessee, I am really not picky. Like if I go to find something in particular and I can't find that particular cultivar, I'll just get the next best thing, right? So this is a great example, the picture that showed here. The past few years, I have not really been on top of my game with getting to nurseries in a timely manner. I know our timing is a little, shifted when you compare Plateau with the Western region here. So we may be doing things typically several weeks earlier than you all are. But for the most part, the majority of folks who like to do containers have probably already been to the nursery and picked out their selections and made sure that they got cultivars and specific varieties that they really, really love. And this is just an example to show you. Last year, that did not happen. I did not go plant shopping until like the last week in May. So I essentially gathered up whatever was left that I thought that I might like and tried them out. And some performed well and others did not. But you know what? That's what gardening is about, is just experimenting, trying new things. I could not tell you what the name of this pinwheel patterned wave petunia is here on the pot on the left, but it was gorgeous and performed all season long. But in this presentation, I am going to recommend to you several types of plants and cultivars that
Celeste, I think we may have lost your video feed this morning.
How's it going?
Okay, yeah, we've got you back now.
Okay, I did just get a message that says my message is unstable, so that may be from all the water that we've had. I'm sorry about that. You just let me know if I lose you, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to start my screen share again. I thought maybe that was messing us up.
Okay.
But essentially, what I'm trying to get at is don't be discouraged if your plans don't work out. You can make beautiful arrangements even if it wasn't exactly as you planned. And this next slide here is just a quick pop. I'm going to give you an intro of things to expect. If you ever watch Tuesday Mornings with Celeste and Jason, where we tour the grounds of the research center, the UT Gardens here in Jackson, you will know that I love hot pink. I like jewel tone colors. So you are bound to see lots of that and chartreuse in my arrangements. This is just a primer to get you ready for that. So I do want to introduce a few things before we get into actually talking about plants. Last year, of course, since we couldn't have any in-person meetings, Jason and I we took it on the road and we did several little short video recordings for our master gardeners talking on the basics of mixed containers. And the first thing we always want to point out is the difference in containers and how we need to treat those when we are making, when we're trying to plan our media and positioning of our plants, essentially. So I prefer plastic pots. I know that sounds silly because they're kind of cheap, but I do prefer them because I feel like they regulate temperature the best. They don't heat up the soil too hot, and it doesn't get too cold too quickly. I don't have to worry about those pots cracking in the wintertime. I'm going to advance here and show you. This is Jason's, he lent me this photo, Jason's collection of several of his pots. And, these large pots are expensive. That is quite an investment, right? So we need to protect our investment and make sure that we're storing our pots properly. I, on the other hand, do not have that much motivation. So I try to go with large pots that are plastic in nature. Make sure whatever material your pots are made of, that they do have drainage holes. And if you're going to splurge on some ceramic pots, make sure that they are glazed, because that is going to help retain moisture as compared to like a porous terracotta pot sitting there on the corner of that table. The terracotta is going to require a lot more water because there's a lot of air exchange right through that material. So if you're using ceramic pots, make sure they have a glaze of some sort on them, similar to that blue one there on the back corner of that table. The next thing we want to talk about after we, cover what type of container we're using is what kind of soil are we going to use to put in these containers. And believe it or not, the majority of bagged media products are not regulated in any fashion. So you may buy one bag of Miracle-Gro potting soil and then go back to the box store, say a month later, and get another one. And that particular bag may have been on a different pallet. That particular pallet might have been made from a different lot at the factory, right, where they were processing the soils, and they may not be exactly alike. So to ensure that I get the consistency that I really prefer, sometimes I do quite a bit of mixing, and you're going to see that here. So this is just a great example. I like to use Pro Mix as the base of my containers because I have several. If you just have one pot, you're not going to need a whole bale of Pro Mix. Let's just focus on a high quality grade potting soil mix. But if you're doing, 5 or more containers, that's going to take a lot of soil. So I usually start with Pro Mix as my base. It has a heavy peat component, so you have good water retention, but it also drains well. And then sometimes I'll add in either just some like raw bagged compost to give it a little more texture and a little more water holding capacity so that the water doesn't drain through quite as quickly. Sometimes I'll add a bag of good quality potting soil. And then depending on where I'm putting this container, and what kind of plants are going to be in it, you may want it to drain more quickly. And in that case, you might look at adding a bag of, they call it like soil conditioner. It's essentially chopped up bark that's chopped up very, very finely and has started the decomposition process. So there's lots of different things. There's no set recipe. This is a personal preference, strictly a personal preference, but we definitely want to make sure that it has good water retention and that it is going to drain well. And then there on the far left, Jason likes to add a little bit of topsoil from his property to containers because he's gone. He might be gone for a week at a time, right? Not with traveling back and forth from the station to his home. And he has found that that helps hold some moisture longer, as it would, right? Native soil is going to hold on to water more tightly than a porous potting mix would. But I don't really recommend this for home gardeners because there could be a lot of weed seeds in there, grass seeds, even disease spores and fungal things. And we've spent a lot of money on our container plants, and we want to safeguard them. So I would suggest not to use topsoil in your mixes. And then this is just a little example of, I took a few snaps last year when I dumped out my containers and began to prepare them for that growing season. I don't like throwing my media away every single year. That is a lot of investment. And so oftentimes I will dump my containers out. I'll work through it, pull out old roots and things that were in there, and then refresh it with some of those amendments we just talked about, whether that's adding a Bella Pro mix or adding a few bags of compost or a soil conditioner, depending on what exactly I'm putting in that container. So I just lay out a big tarp, dump it all on there, and I start the mixing process. And then before I pot everything, I like to take my containers and arrange them, like take my small plant containers and arrange them in my pots. And I might like do this over a period of a few days because I'm not sure, if that's exactly what I want in that container. And if you're like me, I do not go to the nursery with a plan, right? I'm not saying this container needs to have this, and this, and then I have this red container that needs this, and this. I just go, I look for plants that I know do well. I look for color palettes that I know that I enjoy, and then I buy my plants. And when I get home, then I begin putting the puzzle together. Of course, there's lots of ways that you can do that. You could definitely approach it with a list approach. But I, as some of my colleagues like to say, enjoy winging it. So, and they do end up, you can end up with some surprising combinations. Sometimes I'll end up with plants left over that didn't really fit into one of my combinations, and I'll throw them together just in an extra pot I have laying around. And believe it or not, sometimes those are the most stunning combinations, things that I never would have thought to put together. So now I'm going to introduce a few individual plants before we get into talking about combinations and how to mix these. Just things that maybe you haven't thought of before to include in your containers. And this list right here is really focusing on plants, not lists, but these selections here are really going to focus on plants that provide a lot of colorful season-long bloom. And then we'll talk more about those foliage plants and fillers when we get into talking about our mixes. This plant here, this is a hybrid salvia. It's been out for a few years. It's called Rockin' Fuchsia. So there's an entire series of salvia called the Rockin' series. There's a Rockin' Blue, a Rockin' Fuchsia, Rockin' Deep Purple. So just, get out there and research these newer cultivars and see how you like them. I'm going to tell you one of the reasons why I treasure this plant is because you can see these nice fuchsia petals that come out here that the hummingbirds love, by the way. When these fall off, the calyxes remain. You see these dark purple pieces right here? So even after the blooms have fallen off, you still have color interest on the tops of those stems that a lot of people mistake for the actual flower. And this particular picture is one I planted in the ground in a border there that I have around my home, but I thought this is an excellent up close picture for you to get an idea of what this plant could provide you in a container. There are several other newer types of salvia that also do well in containers. Look for things like the Unplugged series. One of the members of the Unplugged series is called So Blue, and it is actually a Farinaceae type salvia. And those are what a lot of people refer to as our mealy cup sages. So the blooms are kind of fuzzy in nature. And it looks like a completely different plant from this hybrid cultivar, the Rockin' series that we're looking at right here. I would suggest, I mean, I love all salvias, and I feel like they all have a specific place in landscape. But for containers specifically, let's stay away from Salvia nemorosas. They are beautiful in the landscape, but they do have a relatively short bloom period, and it's happening right now. And then also an example of that would be like May night, right? I feel like so many gardeners have May night Salvia nemorosa in their gardens. Let's also stay away from Salvia garninicas because they're just going to get too huge. They're going to get super, super tall and I don't want to say leggy because you could maintain the height, but they are just they're well positioned in an actual landscape as compared to a container. If you have questions about things as I'm talking, just go ahead and put them in the chat box, okay? And then we'll address those at the end. All right, another one that I wanted to mention to you all today is Kufia. Oh, they're coming out with so many new Kufias. And again, this picture is it being used in the landscape there at the UT Gardens in Jackson, but I adore this in containers. I actually prefer it in containers because when I plant it in the landscape, sometimes it gets lost because I, at my house, am not able to plant 10 of them. They're beautiful at the gardens when we can plant in mass, but I can't buy 10, but I can buy 2. And so I like to put them in my containers. They have a nice graceful flow. I wouldn't really call them a spiller, but they would act more as a filler that has an interesting bloom. This particular one is called Honey Bells. And so it's kind of like the color in this picture is deceiving. It's more of a pink with a yellow tip on the tip of the cigar end there. And then another that I can never seem to keep myself away from is bat face Kufia. I just love it. And they call it bat face because the red upper petals there look like bat ears. And then of course that dark purple looks like a bat face. And so that's a really fun and interesting plant. And those hot colors kind of contrast to the things that I'm more naturally led towards. So I do lean towards pinks and purples and things like that, lighter purples. But then when you throw red in the mix, that opens up the door for a whole new color palette. You can throw in hot oranges, bold foliage, and just really change the look of a container, just, pivoting on that one plant. And then I cannot leave out calibrachoas, or many of you may refer to them as million bells. That is when they came out on the market, I don't know, when I was in high school. I mean, I guess we had million bells, but I felt like that's what everyone called them then. So we're kind of moving towards calling them calibrachoa because we've got brand new series, improved series that have improved bloom and improved bloom length. And these particular ones that I have on this slide are part of the Super Bell series. Lots of options in colors. You can get these multicolored blooms. Of course, they have solid color blooms. And to me, they are all stunning. They remind me of little miniature petunias, and they never stop. They don't require deadheading. They do not have phases of bloom. Some things like osteospermum, for example, is a beautiful daisy type flower that looks great in containers, but it takes it about a week and a half to cycle through to another bloom when those initial ones fade off. And this does not happen with calibrachoa. So that's a great, great performer. It can act as a spiller and provide some floral interest and color. A plant that I feel like is underused in containers is pentas. I just love them. I love the hot pink. I love the dark pink. I like the red. I like the white. And not only do I love them, but butterflies love them. I caught this picture at the UT Gardens in Jackson last summer. And they are just beautiful. And of course, when you plant them in a container, they're not going to get quite as bushy as they do when you plant them in the landscape. And they do kind of cycle through bloom periods as well, but I enjoy their foliage. Even when the plant itself is cycling through that bloom, I enjoy those big, broad, dark green leaves. So lots of things to add to a container. Oh, I had to throw this one in there. And every time I think about marigolds, I always think about Dr. Bumgardner, Natalie. She always says how that's like the only thing her mom ever wanted to plant. She was like, stop planting those. But I do love marigolds. And I understand if the smell turns you off, but they perform so well in the landscape. But man, they can add a lot of interest to a container. Take a second just to admire the foliage. We're going to focus a lot on foliage here in the next 20 minutes or so. Look at that texture. So we've got, as compared to the broadness of the leaves of these pentas here, look at that segmented leaf and how it adds some movement, it adds some contrast, and that is really important. I try to stress to folks that while color is beautiful and that's what attracts our eye, we want our containers to be attractive and interesting, even if they are cycling through blooms and hit a lull in our bloom period. And this is just a wonderful example of some marigolds mixed with some lantana in the background, and how you can really play off of that foliage texture and colors. A few plants that we see in this picture here that perform wonderfully in containers. We're looking at vinca here. Some people call it periwinkle. This particular one I think is called violet halo, or I don't know, I can't remember the particular name, but I pretty much love all vincas in general. I don't care what color they are or what series they're in. I find them all attractive, and they love heat and they love dryness. So if you have a container that's going to be positioned in your landscape, not on a porch, not on the steps, not somewhere where you're going to hit it with a watering wand every single time you water, this might be an excellent choice for you to put in that container. Vinca loves it hot and dry, as do marigolds. They also love hot and dry. So two good options there. Behind that vinca, you can see that is an ornamental pepper. I'm not exactly sure which one because I can't see the fruit developing on it yet, but maybe it's black pearl. And so not only does it have this beautiful dark foliage to provide interest, but it has super, super cute little black pearl fruits on them. So do not overlook ornamental peppers as accent plants, or even to provide your thriller focal point in a container. And then I threw in a few other little ornamental peppers here. I just love ornamental peppers in general and don't feel like you can really go wrong with them. And they look great tucked into a little container as a little accent, something unexpected. It's not a bloom, it's not foliage. Am I supposed to eat it? Am I not? You don't know what to do with it. But it's interesting, and I love that the peppers on some of these change colors as they mature. So they may all start out yellow and then progress towards red, and I think that's really cool because you get a lot of interest in your containers through that. And you can see back behind these small ornamental peppers, I can't remember the cultivar name of those particular yellow ones, but you can see that purple one back behind them again, which I'm assuming is black pearl because I feel like that's everybody's favorite. Another plant that I wanted to point out to you is the begonia. So, regular wax garden begonias have been around forever, right? We had that whole line. There was vodka, cognac, there were all these names of different types of liquor, which I always thought was strange. When I was working in the nursery in high school, I'm like, what does that mean? Until someone informed me. But we have new lines of begonias, and one of my favorite is called the Big series. And the reason they call them big is because they are. The leaves are big, the blooms are big, the plants get much larger. Our typical wax begonia was probably, less than a foot in height, even at maturity. It'd make a cute little mound, but these make cute little massive mounds. And they can also tolerate more sun than our original wax begonias could. And this big series in particular was bred for tolerance of heat and humidity. So that's wonderful for West Tennessee. And I know even on the plateau, y'all get quite a bit of heat and maybe some humidity as we get on into those summer months. So be sure to look for the begonia big series, and keep in mind that while they can tolerate full sun, they're going to perform much better in full sun if they're under irrigation. And the dark leaves can hold up to the sun a bit longer than the lighter green leaf varieties would. Those greenies would probably start burning on the edges when we got like into August. All right, a few more individual plants and then we'll talk about mixes. This plant is one that I really love, and some people mistakenly call it a New Guinea impatient. And while it does look much like a New Guinea impatient, it is new and improved. These are actually called sun patients, and I feel like you would probably be hard pressed to find what we used to refer to as the New Guinea impatient actually for sale at our local garden centers, because most people have transitioned to these new hybrid sun patients. So I remember when New Guineas came out, they could tolerate a little more sun than your regular impatiens could. So instead of looking at full sun for full shade for garden impatiens, we were looking at part shade, part sun for New Guineas. Well, now with sun patients, we've progressed to full sun. These babies really can take it, but they need water. They can't take full sun without water. As compared to like vinca, it can take full sun without excess, regular water. So there are some stipulations there, but they have beautiful broad foliage, and you can get these variegated leaves with a variety of different bloom colors, anywhere from like a hot orangey tropical kind of color to this bright pink to a dark red. So lots of options there with the sun patient. And then I cannot move on without talking about wave petunia bubblegum. I feel like this is probably everyone's favorite wave petunia for the last 4 or 5 years. And it does, it's a rock star. It blooms all summer long. It grows, grows, grows. You can chop it off and give it a rejuvenation haircut, and then a week later, it'll be back on the road looking great again. I even know some folks who will cut like straggly pieces off and root them in water, and then bam, they have a whole nother bubblegum petunia. So you couldn't sell it, but you could definitely do that for yourself. So I didn't want to move on from individual plants without mentioning bubblegum, which is so beautiful. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about actually making some mixes here for the next little bit, and then we'll do questions, wrap questions up at the end. So this is a picture of one of those containers that Jason and I put together last year when we were doing our little video, online demonstrations of mixed containers. And this really is a beautiful pot, and I wish that I could find the picture of it later in the season when it got mature. Here we have a golden Boston fern. Most people around here call it Rita's Gold. I think that's a sweetheart caladium. We had a trailing Tyrinia down here. It's kind of like purple with a little yellow on it. And it really was a beautiful container. And this is how Jason puts his containers together. He has just I don't want to say very few plants, but he makes fun of me, and I make fun of myself too. I'm a pot packer. I like to put a lot of plants in there because I want them to look, beautiful right off the bat. But sometimes that's a double-edged sword, because while they look pretty impressive at the beginning, I have to do more pruning on them to keep them looking healthy throughout the year. And I have to water more because there's more roots in there. So maybe you don't want to be a plant packer like I am. Maybe you want to give your plants a little more room to breathe, and just know that it's going to take, a month or so for these to really fill out and reach their full potential. And here's another example, a really nice combination of a dragon wing, a caladium, some plectranthus and alternanthera, and this container was larger, so we used more plants for it, but still not quite as packed as I would pack a pot. So now I'm going to show you an example of my pot packing. I guess. Oh, wow. Look at that. The one on the left, I really shoved them in there. And that was too many plants for this particular container. And I think when I got on into the season, I actually removed one of them and moved it to a different area. But we started out with some bacopa here. I had some lobelia here in the front. This particular container was going to go underneath my porch and behind this, you can see on the right where I put it here, behind this gold and silver lace vine. So it was pretty much going to be in, shade all day long. So I put some things that could tolerate a bit more shade. I had a double impatient back here and some polka dot plant and a couple other things. So while I did have a lot of plants in there to start with, I just wanted to kind of show you how it progressed. This picture was taken about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks after initial planting, and it just really came along. And the only thing that you can't see in there at the moment is that double impatient, and it was back here. And I actually had to move this container around because it was getting too much shade for my impatiens and they wouldn't bloom. And when I began rotating these 2 pots that you see here on the right with each other, I was able to achieve a lot more bloom. So if you have some containers that aren't doing exactly how you thought they might, just try giving them a little turn every once in a while, or moving their positions, alternating with other containers, and see if a more light exposure or less light exposure might help. Okay, so the container here on the left is, my initial pot packing. I didn't actually have them planted. I was just setting the containers down in there. And then the picture here on the right was about 3 weeks after it got some growth on it. So I just super love euphorbia. And that's what this little plant in the front here is, with these little white blooms all over it. That's diamond frost euphorbia, the best filler that you will ever get. It blooms all season. Okay. So, some will be fading, but as they're fading, others are coming out, and it just provides so much to the interest of a container. Then in the back here, I had a red and a pink dragon wing begonia, or some people call them angel wings. I realize the terminology is confusing, so don't stress over it. You can call them whatever you want to call them. But I had those kind of as my filler, and I took this picture from the top, so you can't really see the height that was incorporated into that container. But those provided my thriller. They came up and out. My filler was the euphorbia, and then I had some spiller down there. Oh, I'm trying to think. That's not licorice plant. Dichondra, maybe. The name will come to me in a minute. But that was a really nice container. Oh, and I used polka dot plant as a filler. That's the one with the green with the white variegation on there. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, yes, the silver one is Dichondra. Silver Fall is actually Dichondra. And this is another one. I don't think this was last year. I think this was the year before. I went through my camera roll trying to find examples of containers that I wanted to show to y'all. But I essentially, unplanned, made the same identical container as I did the year before, because you can see we've got euphorbia on the left, Dichondra there falling down, polka dot plant, and some dragon wings there. Well, maybe it is the same one. I think it is the same one. I think I just put it up on a plant stand in this picture because that Dichondra had gotten much longer. Yes, that's what I did here. I had put it up on a plant stand because it was looking all weird, just bunched up down on the ground. I wanted to have somewhere for that to drape and fall away. And it really helped with the aesthetics of that particular container. Oh, this was one of my favorites, and it has a good example of a progression. So this lime green plant we see here, this is licorice plant, or helichrysum, I think some people call it. It also comes like in silver, and it's kind of fuzzy. And I think you can get it in a variegated form as well. But it is so pretty, and that is going to serve as our spiller eventually. It takes a minute for it to get a hold in. Also, I put in towards the back, I put an angelonia in there to provide some height. I also included a coleus to kind of give some of that thrilling effect. And then I used calibrachoa as a filler slash spiller. And so the picture here on the right, you can see that was a week or so after I had gotten it planted. But look how beautiful it turned out. This was on into the summer. You can see how that Calibrachoa just spilled over. The Angelonia finally took hold. I think this is like purple mist, maybe if you're looking for a cultivar name. And you will see that I almost always throw a coleus into a container for good measure, right? It's kind of like when you're cooking, just throw in a pinch of salt, whether you need it or not, right? I just throw in a coleus just to safeguard me for good measure. So don't be afraid to use coleus. They lend so much to for height, essentially, and creating that thrilling effect. Because it's hard to find spikes. And we're going to talk about some creative ideas for thrillers here in a minute. This was another one that these were leftover plants. You remember how I told you so I don't always start with the plan. So these were things I just had left over at the end. And I used sage. I didn't have a separate container. I have a little herb area where I do herbs, and I had run out of small pots. So I said, well, I'll just put this sage in my mixed container. That'll be really pretty. Then this yellowy variegated plant that served kind of as my spiller, that is actually Lismachia. What's it called? Walkabout Sunset Lismachia. And don't let it confuse you, because you will also see in the same container on the right is the other Lismachia that most of you are probably familiar with, that we call Creeping Jenny. So they're just two different species of Lismachia. I think the Creeping Jenny is like Nummularia, and like the other one is like, it's weird. I looked it up the other day. Congestiflora. Isn't that funny? It's congested with flowers, I guess. That's why they came up with that. But two different species of Lismachia in this container. Also, I had a rose geranium, coleus, and osteospermum. So you remember me talking about how beautiful osteospermum are, and I put it kind of here in this front center, and it was really pretty, but it just didn't bloom as often as I would like it to. And so for the most part, it was just providing foliar interest. You can see here on the right, once it matured a bit, it did have nice foliage, even though I didn't get the bloom that I would have liked to have seen from that. And then these are some that I put on the very front of the porch. You know, they get a lot more sun than many of these other containers that I've been showing y'all. You know, they're pulled out from that canopy. And the one here on the left is kind of when I had positioned them. You can see the ones here on the right were after they had gotten quite a bit of growth on them. And this was an unnamed petunia. I have no idea what it was called, and I loved it. And I'm going to look for it again. It was hot pink, and it was edged in chartreuse, like a limey green kind of color. So beautiful. Kimberly queen ferns, sun-loving coleus, million bells, creeping jenny. These are all things that would do great and take full sun locations. Like if you're looking to do containers around pools or just somewhere where you're getting a lot more exposure to light. Now, while we're talking about coleus, I have to mention that the majority of our newer coleus, the ones that you're going to be finding on the market, are vegetatively grown, right? So they not started from seed, I guess you would say. And most of them are sun loving, and their colors are actually more vibrant when they are in sun. If you put a sun loving coleus in shade, it's going to be a lot duller. And a few examples, like Proven Winter has a whole series, and they're called Color Blaze. And a few of my favorites are Wicked Witch. I didn't have like individual pictures of each of these, but I loved Wicked Witch. I had it last year in several containers. It's dark purple with a thin lime greeny edge. Apple Brandy, which is like a russet color with chartreuse edges, and the leaves are like skinnier and more jagged than, you know, what we typically think of as a coleus. What was another favorite? Lime Time was just straight up lime green, and Sedona Sunset. It's kind of like an orangey. I don't know, it's weird. I didn't like it at first, but one of my friends said, just try it. It's going to go with everything, no matter what your color palette is. And it really did. And I think it's because it just pulls out whatever colors, you know, you are trying to emphasize in your design. Sedona Sunset, it was really pretty. I'm sorry, I don't have an individual picture of it. And that was after I got a few more weeks of growth on there. I ended up having to chop this baby back, everything except the Kimberly Queen, of course. And within about 2 weeks, it was back to looking great. The Japanese beetles did a number on the one over here on the right, so I didn't include a picture of that because it wasn't too cute. And then this is one from the station. Most of the time, the mixed containers at the station really focus on foliage emphasis and how to, create that that interest without the use of blooms. But I thought this one was particularly pretty. We have shrimp plant in the background. This lantana here, the pink and yellow lantana, and then down at the bottom, that is not Calibrachoa. Actually, that is like, I think it's like mini Supertunia, or I can't remember the series names, but it's a really small version of a wave petunia or Supertunia. And then just a few, I don't know why I put that in there. Oh, a few more. Wanted to mention caladiums. So for so long, we use caladiums strictly, as shade plants, but there are many sun tolerant and actually sun-loving cultivars of caladium out there now. Some that have been around for a while are Postman Joiner. It's like a dark red with a green edge. Red Ruffles is like a mini one. And Gingerland, which is like mostly white and has little speckles, like pinkish reds, or maybe it's green speckles, I can't remember, on there. Those have been around for a while. But some others that have come onto the market, names would be like Burning Heart, Candyland, I think Florida Sunshine. I think that's what this one is that we're looking at here. No, not Sunshine, Florida Sweetheart. Miss Muffet. I love Miss Muffet. And then, if you can't find any of those, you can always just keep an eye out for Proven Winner caladiums. They have a series called Heart to Heart, and then lots of different selections within that series. So those would be some things to look for. And here, I just want to mention, I threw in some Ajuga. So that's a perennial, and I was able to repurpose this container and take out those summer annuals when they faded and replace with some fall plants, and it did double duty for me there. Maybe if we have another class series in the fall, I have another presentation where I just focus on using perennials in containers and how you can use like 2 or 3 of those to be your main structure and then rotate in and out for seasonal colors. That would be a fun thing to talk about. Don't underestimate the use of house plants in your containers. One of my master gardeners took some of her mother-in-law's tongue. She lost she had some upright conifers in these pots, and she lost them due to like a canker disease. And she just popped her mother-in-law's tongue in there, and they were stunning all summer long. A few other ideas to create thrill, right? Interest, that big, tall attraction for your pots. If you have large pots, you could use canna. So pretty. They're also going to lend a more tropical feel. So those could be some options for you. And then these were some containers at Jason Reeves' house. I think the one on the right was a banana. And I'm not sure what this crazy one here on the left is. Some kind of house plant, I'm sure, that he brings in and out of a greenhouse each year. I'm not sure why I included this one. Maybe the one on the right there, that's a variegated Liriape muscari, the clumping type. And I just thought that was really pretty because that's all I planted in that container. And I moved it around the garden like throughout the season just to kind of change things up and give a little pop of color. And then the ones on the left here, I guess maybe that was an example of how I used basil. You could use basil as your thriller, as a main broadleaf thriller in your containers for that upright interest. And there was a black pearl in there too. My daughter actually fell in the middle of that pot, and that's why it looks kind of weird. She broke off the majority of the caladium in the back and the black pearl in the middle. And then we'll throw these in before we wrap up and allow some time for questions. But these are some from the station at the UT Gardens in Jackson. And you remember how I told you they focus a lot on foliar interest. So this container on the left is comprised solely of different types of potato vine and coleus in very vibrant, contrasting color palettes. And I don't know why it's so easy to do, but purple and chartreuse just go together so magically that it's just hard to beat that color combination. The one here on the right, oh wait, let's go back to the one on the left. I see another plant poking out there. That looks like Persian shield over here on the far left and kind of up here in the back. So maybe that coleus got taller than we thought it would. But I do love Persian shield. Don't forget about that as an interesting foliage plant that could help maybe be a thriller or some upright growth in your containers. Then the one here on the right, the taller plant in the back, that is one of those color blaze coleus. I'm not sure exactly which one. And then Purple Prince alternanthera is that purple foliar plant that is growing down and weeping over the sides. And I just so love Purple Prince. I feel like you can just stick one little, this is more than one plant, but you could just stick one little plant in there and get some movement and some color. And it's just really a nice plant. Then this picture here on the left, this was, I just want to throw it in there. That was an example of how you could use those sun patients. I think this is that Lismachia sunset walkabout again. And you can see that it doesn't have the yellow blooms on it at this time. And these New Guineas, not New Guineas, these sun patients will actually probably go through a short bloom turnaround as well. So when there are no blooms on there, this container is still going to look attractive because we've got that variegation of the foliage, the contrasting colors, and even the different textures of leaf. And I think that's what I was going for in this picture on the right here as well, is just showing the different size, the different shape and texture, and even color of those leaves. So if my begonias ever cycled through bloom, or sometimes when it gets really hot, bacopa doesn't bloom well. So even if I didn't have any blooms at all in this container, it would still be a nice, attractive container. This is a climbing begonia at Jason Reeves' house. I thought it was interesting. If you look down to the base of it, he just grows it in a pot and he moves it in and out year after year after year. Of course, I mean, he cuts it off and then moves the roots in so that it doesn't die each year. But don't discount the use of pots to grow climbing vines, right? And if they are positioned properly in an area, that could serve to your advantage. And then I threw this in here because most of the time I'm trying to design individual pots to look good, right? But if you have, 50 pots like Jason does, he might just plant one plant in that pot. If you can see this caladium that's down here in the bottom right, that one pot just has caladium in it, and that is all. And then he will arrange those containers in little vignettes, if you will, kind of like this, to create a larger impact. So while on a smaller scale, I may use some of these individual plants in a mixed container, he is using single containers of one or two plants and then putting them together just to have a larger impact. And the thing I'm going to leave you with is don't be afraid to cut your containers back. I feel like almost everyone, we get into July, they're beautiful, and you just don't want to cut off that vegetation, but don't be afraid. Look at all this that was cut off these containers here. We put another dose of Osmocote slow release fertilizer on there, and they get a soluble fertilizer once a week through a watering. And in 2 weeks, those containers were looking better than ever. And so with that, I will say, let's look at any questions that anybody might have. Don't discount